Those folks who may have arrived after I made my initials, there's decaf coffee in the back and lots of snacks. After we get about halfway through the program, we're going to have the opportunity for you folks to present some questions to the candidates. There's a basket and some index cards in that back corner. We ask that you put your question on a card and put it in that basket, and then we'll bring it up. Since it's 7 o'clock, I'll get started. I'm John Thrasher. I've been asked to moderate this debate for the Rutland-Bennington House seat. We have the incumbent, Robert Chestnut-Tangerman, running as a Democrat, the challenger, Pritchard, running as a Republican. I'm going to give each candidate 3 to 5 minutes to introduce themselves to you. Then we're going to give each candidate an opportunity to raise 3 topics that they would like to discuss, either in the question format to the opposing candidate or just going into a topic. They'll have 4 minutes to discuss that topic, and the other candidate will have 4 minutes to respond. So each candidate will have 3 different topics that they can raise to discuss this evening. After that, we'll take a short break, maybe get another little piece of sweets at the back. I'll grab the questions, and we'll start going through the questions at that point in time. We're asking everybody to remain civil this evening. This is an opportunity for us to have an opportunity for us to get to know the candidates and where they stand. So if you have a question or a concern, please direct it to me as the moderator, and we'll go from there. So, I think we said that we were going to give Chris, you the opportunity to introduce yourself first.
Good evening. Everybody hear me? Okay. I'm Chris Pritchard. I was born here in Vermont. I grew up in South Poultney. Went through the Poultney school system. Graduated high school and went right into the workforce. I worked in the automotive field for about 40 years. Started washing cars for Phil Alderman at his dealership in Rutland, and ended up most of my career in Manchester, Vermont, working for 2 brothers, Jim and John Hand. I'm married. I met my wife at Green Mountain College in Poultney. She was a student, and I was loading the dishwasher, and she was unloading it, and next June we'll be married 40 years. She took a teaching career. She taught at the Wells Village School for about 15 years, and then finished up at the Meadowy Community School. And she retired in 21 as I did. Interests I have and things I do, I've been a certified hunter safety instructor for the state of Vermont for about 35 years. I'm heavily involved with our local 4-H shooting sports program in Pawlet. I've had the privilege to take 2 Vermont teams to the Nationals in Grand Island, Nebraska, where they got to compete with 42 other states and meet a lot of kids. It's a great program. The kids learn community service. They help with the Pawlet Library book sale move. They've done stuff for the Rupert Fire Department community, holding their banquets, and there's a lot of value to the program, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. And that's about it. I mean, the reason that I'm running and wanted to get into this is I'm concerned for a lot of people that live here and have to work within this economy. And I think it's gotten tough for them, and really that's been the focus of my campaign, is trying to help them. So thank you for all coming tonight, and you're up, Robin.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm Robin Chestnut-Tangerman. I thought that I probably wouldn't really need to reintroduce myself this evening, but considering some of the descriptions of myself that I've read recently online, I think I do, because that guy with the trust fund who never had to get his hands dirty or worry about paying bills, I don't know who that is. My preschool years were in Vermont and New Hampshire, and the period before my dad died, before we moved to the farm in western New York, where I was that typical farm kid with a bad haircut, growing up mucking out stalls and picking grapes and swinging a hammer. And that turned into about 25 years of being a self-employed builder, well acquainted with aching backs and dirty pretty much everything that you get as a builder. But like many Vermonters, I've also done a lot of other things to make a living, keep my family together, including being an educator. I was a licensed high school social studies teacher. I worked with at-risk teens at the Smoky House program for 3 years, taught adjunct at Green Mountain College in the Renewable Energy and Ecological Design program. Hi, Carl. Also, I was a mediator, and for the last 4 years, a realtor based here in Pawlet. Ultimately, Melissa and I followed the call back to Vermont. We settled in Middletown Springs 33 years ago. We raised our family there, built our house, put down roots. Now we raise chickens and a couple of pigs and some bees. Melissa has fabulous gardens and is which keep us well fed for that, and is also the administrator and co-founder of the truly amazing Theater in the Woods summer camp for children. We founded a town newsletter. I served in the fire department, on the select board, the library board, the energy committee, the various town committees, and then as your representative in Montpelier. Serving the community it's what I do. Gives my life meaning. So I'm asking to go back to Montpelier because we have a lot of work to do there. COVID exposed a lot of fractures in our society, both in the state level and the national and global levels. And the challenges are obvious. You know, affordability is one, housing is one, the future of agriculture, climate change, education, mental health, the list of challenges goes on, and these challenges require more than talking about spending cuts. They require vision and creativity and planning and smart investment. And smart investment is the best tool that we have to build the Vermont that we want. We need investments that will pay off dividends to create the Vermont that our children can and want to stay in, and that other people can and want to move to and raise their families in. And we're making those investments now. We're making those investments in childcare, in broadband, in voter participation, in small farm sustainability, in housing rehabilitation, in a healthy environment. And these are all issues that I have worked on directly in my time in Montpelier. In the last session, the legislature passed 185 bills and 27 charter changes. It's a very wide scope of work. Affordability is a key issue there, but it's not all of it. And we need that kind of broad vision and perspective and creativity that can approach a wide array of work. I believe I've shown that I have the experience, the temperament, the competence, the judgment, and the vision to do that work. Thank you.
Thank you for those introductions. Chris, I'm going to give you the opportunity to raise the first topic, 4 minutes. either a brief question to Robin, and he'll have 4 minutes, in which case you have 4 minutes to respond, or if you want to raise an issue and speak on it for 4 minutes, then Robin would have 4 minutes to respond. So, your choice.
Yeah. No, I have 3 issues that I want to speak about, and they're important. They've come up with a lot of folks that I've talked to, and I think they're on a lot of folks' minds. So, the first thing I want to talk to is Act 153, the Global Warming Solutions Act, and Act 18. These are laws that Robin has voted for, the governor has vetoed them, and Robin has overridden them, so they are now law. The Global Warming Solutions Act was a law adopted regarding the 2016 Paris Agreement. It sets 3 timelines, January 2023, or 2025, 2030, and 2050, to reduce emissions. It's an agreement that we signed on to. Robin supported it. It requires that we reduce greenhouse emissions by not less than 80% of the 1990 greenhouse levels. There's some things in this bill that are concerning. There's a change in verbiage in this bill that went from goals to requirements. And I think it's important that you know that. It also establishes a cause of action. And what this cause of action clause allows is that anybody that doesn't feel we meet those requirements is allowed to sue the taxpayer of the state of Vermont. And I think, I don't think that's a clause that is in the best interest of constituents. You know, we all work hard towards goals. To make it requirements and have no leeway, if we make 99% of this goal, legally, we can be sued. It also contains a clause that states the energy policy must ensure affordability. Must ensure affordability. The definition of that is to make certain it shall occur or will be the case. Nearly $1 million was appropriated to fund the global warming solution. It became law September 22nd, 2020. Act 18 essentially sets forth mandates to achieve the requirements of the Global Warming Solutions Act. This law specifically targets fossil fuels, mainly heating oil, propane, and kerosene. Nearly 75% of all the homes and businesses in this state utilize these heating sources. It will affect 3 out of every 4 Vermont families and businesses. It establishes a complex heat credit program. A clean heat credit means a tradable, non-tangible commodity that represents the amount of greenhouse reduction attributable to a clean heat measure. The Public Utility Commission will be tasked with developing a system to manage this. This will add a huge burden and cost to the nearly 200 fuel dealers, mostly small family-owned businesses that deliver Vermont these products that keep their homes and businesses warm. The administration required will be complex, expensive, and they will have to account for every single gallon of fuel they sell. The small family-owned fuel businesses, whose owners and workers you know by name, who employ your neighbors and contribute to your kids' fundraisers and the Vermont economy, will be harmed by this, and many will cease to exist. And that is why the big corporate fuel companies support this. It will eliminate their competition, increase their profit, and you will pay for this. How much will this cost? NV5, a consultant company from Heinsberg, was tasked with this. The original estimate of $17 billion has been revised to $9.6 billion. The estimated fee on a gallon of heating oil has also been revised from 70 cents a gallon to a minimum of $1.73 to $4 a gallon.
Chris, that's the 4 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Robin, you'll have 4 minutes to respond if you want to continue on this topic.
I would like to, yes.
At a different time.
This is a serious issue, and it's a complex issue. It is a financial issue, it's a moral issue, and it's but the Global Warming Solution Act was Vermont stepping up and saying, yes, our nation has signed on to this greenhouse gas reduction, and we are willing to play our part in it and work toward that goal. The Affordable Heat Act is a plan that the legislature commissioned the Public Utilities Commission to create. The legislature said, we want to create a system, a plan that reduces consumption of price volatile fossil fuels, makes heating affordable, predictable, and cleaner, and benefits lower and middle income Vermonters. That's a tall order. That's why the legislature didn't say, hey, and we're going to tell you how it's going to work, because we don't know that. It's very complicated. So we instructed the experts to devise a plan. And that plan will come before the legislature in January of 2025. The legislature can approve it, reject it, or revise it. To me, the fact that we have this information, well, I will tell you, I voted for that plan, for the Public Utilities Commission to create that plan in April of 2023. The figures that we are hearing, which are preliminary figures, the final figures, will not be available until January, and the fact that they have been essentially cut in half shows that the original figures were not very accurate either. So I would say do not trust any of the figures, the preliminary figures you're hearing. Wait until January, hear what the figures are. That's when the plan is complete. The fact that we are having this information now that we did not have in April of 2023 shows that the plan is working. They are devising a plan as instructed, which will tell us what we need to know in January. I can also tell you that no legislator is going to vote for a plan, nobody, that will add $1.90 to a gallon of heating fuel. That's not going to happen. We'll try another plan. The legislature will try to meet our goals in a way that is affordable, sustainable, and doesn't injure primarily the lower and middle income Vermonters. That is the goal. And if the plan does not achieve the goal, we will not use that plan. The legislature will look for another plan. So there is to say that it will do this and will have this effect is supposition. We don't know what the plan is yet. We don't know the impact, and the figures that we've heard have included things like Green Mountain Power doing a grid upgrade, which they're planning on doing anyway. That's not part of the Affordable Heat Act. That's an energy system upgrade that will benefit the Affordable Heat Act, but is not caused by it. That cost was included in the original figures. So there's a lot of work to be done reviewing the figures and verifying the veracity of them. Thank you.
Okay, Robin, now you have an opportunity to ask a question or raise a topic that you would like to spend 4 minutes on, and then Chris will have an opportunity to respond.
So I would like to ask Chris a question, which is that housing is at a crisis situation in Vermont. And considering the financial realities that we have here, what would your proposal be to address the housing crisis in Vermont in the coming session?
I think it's going to involve the public participation. I think people getting involved rehabbing. There's 2,200 homes in disrepair right now, I believe, in Rutland County. I mean, there's a lot that can be done to rehab these. You know, the VHIP program helps with that. It helps rehab these houses. And I think that, you know, I think that that's the route to go. I don't think the state of Vermont can afford to heavily subsidize this. We're spending a lot of money on a lot of things, and I think we have to prioritize those as to what is most important. So that would be my feelings on it. And if I still have time, I would like to go back to this because this is important.
Certainly.
Okay. And I'll try to be a little quicker. So if the NV5 estimate that was put forth puts it around the $4 mark. That means a 275-gallon tank of fuel that you fill now for $8.75 will cost nearly $2,000. There was a representative in Rutland County that asked to establish a cap on the per gallon fee because of the inability to establish an accurate estimate. His request was denied. Regardless of what ends up being the requirements of the law, they must be met to avoid a lawsuit. Failure to comply, you will pay for this. How will it affect the most vulnerable that depend on the fuel assistance program in our state right now? They will lose about $500 of their benefit that they receive. If action is taken to correct this, you will pay for that also. Why are we paying this fee? This money will be used to fund weatherization efforts and install non-fossil fuel heating systems such as heat pumps, hot water, heat pumps, geothermal systems in order to achieve the goals of 2050. Here's where we stand on meeting those requirements. We are not on target to achieve the 2025 requirements, and the Conservation Law Foundation has taken action to sue the Vermont taxpayer, and this has been made possible by changes made and supported by Robin, with the clause of action and goals to requirements. Time will tell how many more might want to exercise this option, but it is open to anyone and everyone who wishes to do so. It also appears as if we will fail to reach the 2030 requirements, which depend heavily on weatherization efforts and the installation of more than 250,000 heat pumps and hot water heat pumps. There are approximately 700 people in this state that are qualified to do this. It's 14% of what is needed to accomplish it. Anytime this action has failed, the Secretary is responsible for putting a plan to correct it so we can achieve the requirements. Regardless of the cost, doesn't matter, you will pay it. It is ironic that not one penny of this money will be spent on reducing our carbon footprint or reducing emissions. And how big of a polluter is Vermont?
Okay, that's the end of your...
It's going to take me a while to get through this.
Okay, that's all right.
But it's important, and
Robin,
people need to know
you
this.
used a minute of your time to ask the question about housing. You have 3 minutes to respond either to the housing question or to the heat issue that's being raised.
Okay. Thank you. The question about housing is critical. We have rising numbers of homeless in Rutland County. It's not a distant and far off thing. And it requires planning, vision, forethought, and investment. Certainly we need to partner with the private sector to achieve housing goals. But to say that the state cannot afford to invest in housing is hand-wringing. It's saying, oh, well, sorry. And that is not a responsible position for the state to take. We need to take action. Going back to the Affordable Heat Act, since apparently we'll be spending a lot of time on this evening. The right of private action, the right for a citizen to sue the state for not achieving its proclaimed goals does exist. I did support it. Evidence has shown us in other states that without the ability for people to hold your feet to the fire, the state just keeps forgiving itself and saying, oh, well, you know, we didn't meet those goals, but we sure gave it a good try. This enables enforcement. The enforcement is not a payment or compensation to the person suing. It's try again. The last plan wasn't good enough, try a new plan. Keep trying. That's what the enforcement is. And if that's what it takes for us to keep trying to achieve this very difficult goal, then that's what gets us there. It's not a monetary outlay to the lawsuits. It's just a better plan. And I don't have a problem with being told that we need a better plan if we're not achieving our goals. The other thing is that, you know, if the goal adds $4 to a heating fuel, we won't do that goal. We will not do that. And the check is there that we push as hard as we can to try to achieve that goal. But if in the end it's unattainable, we'll have to back off from that. But I'm not willing to back off from that until we have tried our very best.
Okay, thank you. Chris, it's your opportunity to raise your second of three.
Yeah. I'm going to keep going on my first, if that's okay with everyone. I'm almost through it. I'm almost through it.
Okay.
So, what does Vermont contribute? 0.5% of the entire nation. On a global scale, it is barely measurable. According to a 2023 report by the Energy Action Network, an organization committed to this efforts, and I'm sure Robin is aware of them, their findings indicate a global increase in greenhouse gas emissions, essentially negating all of Vermont's efforts, even if we meet 100% of the goal. A very large investment to make for essentially no return. How have we done up to this point before making this investment? In the 1980s, the average Vermont home used 1,700 gallons of heating oil. It presently uses 700. The Energy Actions Network own report shows that we have reduced heating oil consumption by 22% in the last 4 years. We have weatherized thousands of homes through programs we already have in place, and through technology, our heating systems have become much more efficient, and because of that, we have met almost 50% of the 2025 goal before we spent a penny of the $9.6 billion. Act 18 appropriated nearly $2 million, $825,000 to the Public Utility Commission, $900,000 to the Department of Public Service. They hired 2 attorneys, 4 analysts, an unspecified amount of consultants. Part of that money paid for the NV5 report, which provided the estimate. Part of it paid for a 12-page report that just came out October 1st. And it was a status comparison report by the Public Utility Commission. And these are their findings, and I quote, "It does not make sense for Vermont as a lone small state to develop a clean credit market and the clean credit trading system. The clean heat standard would require establishing a credit marketplace managed by what is likely to be a costly credit platform with potential for fraud and market manipulation. At current funding levels, Vermont will fail to achieve its ambitious goals to reduce energy usage and greenhouse gas emissions." So I'd like Robin to answer 2 questions if he could. One, I guess I'd like to know how you're going to vote on it. You've been consistent in how you're going to vote on this all along. Initially, before this became, before this went into the study period, which we're going to vote on January, Robin voted to put this into place immediately. So if that had happened, we would be seeing the consequences of that right now. And the other thing I want to ask you is, do you accept the report's conclusions? Do you accept what these people have brought to the table?
I'm completely bewildered by you saying that I voted to implement it immediately. The Affordable Heating Act always had a report that came back to the legislature for review, and then the legislature would need to vote on that plan. I have no idea how I'll vote on that plan because I haven't seen it. I support the goals, but I don't know what the mechanism is, so I don't know if I will support it or not. Based on what I've heard from preliminary reports, and again, they're preliminary, the implementation plan has not been done. We don't know what that implementation plan is. But based on what I've heard, I would not support that because it doesn't meet the goals that we set out to achieve, including not harming lower and middle income Vermonters. There was another thing in there that you said that I did, which I don't understand. Can you ask the other question again?
I'm not sure what that was, Robin.
It was a question about whether or not you agreed with the report that just came out.
Oh, yeah. Do you agree with the conclusions? I thought you were going back on earlier.
I haven't read the latest report. I'm waiting for the January report. I don't know what the conclusions...
The report's available now.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the complete report because the plan is not complete, the implementation plan is not complete, and the impacts and costs are not complete. So I'm waiting for mid-January when the full report will be released to make my judgments when I have all the information.
And do you think their conclusions will be different, though?
I don't know. I do trust the process, yes, but I don't know how I will vote because I don't know what the conclusions will be or what the plan will be.
Okay. So, Robin, it is now your opportunity for your second topic. I'm going to remind folks, because at this point we're halfway through the 3 topics each. There's a basket in the back if you want to ask a question. There's index cards, write it down on the card. I forgot to mention, when we're pulling and looking at these topics and asking questions, we're only going to deal with issues that the state of Vermont and the legislature can handle. So if there's some sort of national issue or concern about national type of activities, that's not going to be a question that's going to be asked of these candidates. So it's only things that they have control over as a member of the House. So if your question related to something else, you may want to revise your question. Robin?
Thank you. This topic is not a question for Chris. It's sort of a celebration of work that the legislature has done and that I was particularly involved in, and that is the expansion of broadband throughout the state. And Jessica, thank you for being the Pawlet representative to the Otter Creek CUD and all the work that you and the other volunteers have done. And I stress volunteers there. It's a lot of work. For 2 terms, I served on the Energy and Technology Committee in the House. And one of our issues was the dismal state of high-speed internet in Vermont. And it seemed pretty insurmountable given the low density of population and the fact that internet companies go where they have enough density, enough takers per mile to make a profit. And it was becoming an exact replica of in the 1930s and 40s when Vermont electrified and large swaths of rural Vermont did not get power because it didn't pay for the companies to go there. So Vermonters, as they usually do, buckled up their boots and they created local rural Vermont cooperatives and worked together to bring power to the areas that were not served by the major power companies. Well, we looked for a model for that for broadband, and we found it in an organization called EC Fiber in Norwich, which was managing fiber optic network to their subscribers in a community-based, community-run organization. And thought, how can we expand this? And that was the creation of the CUDs, the Communications Union Districts. We really needed a better acronym than that, but that's what we were stuck with. So those were created. Local communities banding together to create them, most consisting of several towns, some up 20-some towns for the southwestern Vermont Communications Union District. And they, working locally, local volunteers, state people, and federal people, and I have half a minute left, and a big infusion of federal funding made this a reality. All of Bennington County now has high-speed fiber optic networks. Pawlet now has high-speed fiber optic. I've been invited to a couple of ribbon cuttings for other CUDs who have succeeded in installing high-speed fiber optic network throughout the state. I think it is a remarkable example of what can be done with vision, planning, foresight, and investment.
I think a CUD, cud, cows chewing cud, is an appropriate acronym. Chris, you can respond or bring up a topic. You have 4 minutes.
Okay. I want to talk about affordability because it's just an important issue. I think it resonates with so many people. In the last 10 years, Vermont's personal income tax receipts have increased 54%. Sales tax receipts have increased 65%. Corporate taxes have tripled. Property taxes have increased by 53%. Vermont has the second highest property tax burden in the nation and is closing in on being number one. Their burden is 44% higher than California. Of all these increases, dwarf the economic growth, inflation, wage, and salary growth during the same period by a lot. We have spent most of it, and still Vermonters are asked for more, and the well is running dry. The total state budget between fiscal year 2020 and 2024 has increased 38%, growing our state budget to $8.7 billion. The size of government continues to grow. We have twice as many employees per capita as the neighboring state of New Hampshire, and we spend almost 40% more than they do. The largest employer in the state of Vermont is the state of Vermont, 9,100 employees. The first half of the biennium, we added 50 full-time permanent positions to state government. We added the first in the nation $160 million payroll tax that also added another 15 full-time positions. We added 20% to DMV fees. The 321-page appropriations bill in the first half of the last biennium listed these new fees. They take up 40 pages of this bill. And these fees will extract $22.4 million from Vermonters and not only increase their costs, but add thousands of dollars to our small business owners depending on the size of their fleet. This increase was not sought by the DMV. They testified in front of both the House and Senate it was unnecessary, but it was voted for anyways. Instead of funding a school lunch program that focuses on the most vulnerable, we instituted one that pays for everyone, regardless of income. In the past 2 years, a supermajority that has controlled this legislature has voted to raise taxes and fees on Vermonters by nearly $500 million. The accumulated cost of all these votes that Robin and the supermajority have cast on your behalf will cost the average Vermont family $1,200 out of their yearly budget. This year, next year, and every year after, because there are no sunsets. The governor and the minority have offered options and compromises to all these, and these folks have been in full control of both the House and the Senate and have been unwilling to compromise on any of them, not a single one. And in many cases, they would not consider even discussing them, leaving the governor no choice but to veto some of these bills. I feel that vetoes are a result of people being unwilling to sit at the table together and have an open and candid conversation of their differences and work out a solution that is fair and equitable to all, one that considers the best interest of all Vermonters. When that veto is overwritten, it means that they have put an exclamation point on it and are unwilling to go back to the table and have that conversation. Robin put an exclamation point on every single one of Governor Scott's vetoes. The lack of support the governor has got has cost millions of dollars. Phil Scott is the most popular governor in the nation.
Your 4 minutes in response to...
I almost got there.
But wait, I've got good news. The good news is it's your turn to introduce a new topic, and you have 4 minutes to discuss any topic that you wish. So you've got another
Well, I'll
4
finish
minutes.
that and yield to Robin.
What will that be?
And then that'll give me some time to go to my next one, maybe. I just have a short part left to do this. Phil Scott is the most popular governor in the nation. In his last election, he won every single town in the state of Vermont, all 251 towns. He is supported by Vermonters of all political persuasions. I believe that he has his support because he tries to govern with the best interest of all Vermonters, regardless of their party affiliation. I think most Vermonters respect and appreciate that. But the present imbalance in this legislature has not allowed him to do that, and he is asking for you to help. And this present supermajority's actions have clearly shown they are unwilling to do that. Amongst all these financial challenges that have been inflicted upon the people of the state over the last 2 years is the ever-increasing rise in property taxes. This year, the state average was 13.8%. Some folks were spared from this, but some saw increases as much as 30% or higher due to the yield bill that the supermajority chose to put forth for a vote. They refused to even consider the governor's options that would have achieved a better result at around 4 or 5%. In December of last year, Senate Majority Leader Phil Bruce made this statement regarding the property tax increase, and this is what he said: "If we cannot get this to 1 or 2%, none of us should return here next year." You will have the opportunity on November 5th to decide that.
So that was
How much time did I save myself?
That was you
Not enough, I know.
If you want to throw a question to Robin,
No, right.
you have 4 minutes to respond.
It's funny how the perspective shifts depending on where you're sitting. The governor,
I think that was pretty universal.
the governor is elected by the people. Representatives are elected by the people. Senators are elected by the people. The Democratic majority in the legislature is not a plot or a some kind of, I don't know what. I mean, you didn't say conspiracy, but it's every bit as legitimate as the governor's election. It is the will of the people, quite literally. There's nothing more will of the people than the representatives they elect. They elect the legislature to do their work. Affordability is absolutely critical. Property taxes are absolutely critical. The driver of that is that we use property taxes as the primary funding mechanism for schools. I really appreciate the work of school boards, especially this year, in trying to bring down budgets, trying to reduce the increase that pretty much every school board across the state had to accept with the perfect storm of increases that they were hit with, including student emotional and mental health care increases, just the cost of hiring a bus driver, someone with a CDL license. All of these were drivers for huge cost increases to schools, and school boards worked hard to bring those down. Because we use property taxes as a primary funding tool for education, that's where the increase hit. Other states do not necessarily count their students' mental health and support services as part of their education budget. They count it as part of their health and welfare budget. So it's not an apples to apples comparison when we talk about how much Vermont is spending per student, or the cost of education, where it's coming from, because we are allocating education costs that other states are not. What can I do about this? I have twice introduced bills to switch from a property tax base to an income tax base to fund our education systems. I've not succeeded in that yet, but I've been trying, you know. The cost, transportation fees increase. The administration is supposed to produce a fee bill which raises fees in accordance with increased costs, inflation. It's supposed to happen every couple years. The transportation fee bill had not been raised since 2016. Somebody give me something that hasn't increased in cost since 2016. Only thing I can think of that hasn't increased is the federal minimum wage. But costs increase. The amount of money that the state was receiving to cover those costs was not increasing. So the legislature did the responsible thing and bit the bullet, because those fees help fund our transportation system. If you want good roads, if you want state aid to highways, if you want the state to paint the lines on your local roads, we need money for that. The state needs money. That's one of the places it comes from. So it was actually the legislature stepping up and raising money that the administration was unwilling to raise to meet the needs of Vermonters.
Okay, that's your time. You have about 2 minutes left on your third topic before you threw a question to Robin. Do you want to use that 2 minutes now to rebut anything, or otherwise I'm going to go to his third topic?
And is 2 minutes all I got left?
Except your 4 minutes in response to his third topic.
I'm going to reserve my 6 minutes, since I'm obviously long-winded, and let Robin go.
Okay, Robin, your third topic, you've got 4 minutes, any topic.
Does he get 6 minutes or 4?
Well,
I get my 2, and
I'll give him 6.
Okay. I'm going to keep landing on other topics, because the work of the legislature is really varied, and there are a lot of different topics to touch on. This one is it's environmental. It's about neonicotinoids, which are a class of insecticides used to treat seeds in commercial agriculture. I think of neonics, they're called neonics because no one can say neonicotinoids and not look foolish doing it. I think of it as very similar to the story of DDT in the country. DDT was a powerful insecticide. It was an amazing tool for farmers. It was very effective and widely used until we decided as a society that the negative side effects were too great. The external costs weren't worth the benefit. And we looked for alternatives. And in the 1990s, one of the alternatives that developed was neonicotinoids. And they're great. They're less toxic than DDT. They're very effective, and they are now the most widely used insecticide in the world by a long shot. However, because they're very effective, they're also deadly to pollinators and other non-target insect species. Primarily we talk about honeybees, but Vermont has over 300 species of wild bees that are also affected. Moths, butterflies, birds, anything that may eat the seed. The impacts are great. And when a seed is coated, about 3% of that neonic is taken up into the plant itself to repel pests from the plant. The other 95 to 97% leaches out into the soil and water. And we don't really know the effect on, say, the invertebrates in the water. We do know the effect on pollinators, and it's devastating. And this is not my opinion. This is science. The Cornell University did the meta-study on this following 5,000 field trials and 1,000 studies on pesticides, and they have determined that the damage to insect pollinators from neonics is essentially catastrophic, and that if farmers stop using neonics on their seeds and use untreated seeds or alternative treatments like diamides, they do not suffer crop loss or financial loss because of it. New York State passed a law in December. They passed it last July, but the governor signed it in December, phasing out the use of neonicotinoids in New York with a ban in 2029. I introduced a bill that mimicked New York's law. It was passed. The testimony in both House and Senate Agriculture was very broad, very fair, including pesticide manufacturers, seed distributors, farmers, beekeepers. And this 5-year window is to allow farmers, manufacturers, distributors to adapt and make plans for this new market. I also attended the Vermont Annual Beekeepers Association meeting where they said, any talk about neonics not having a negative effect is, they didn't say hogwash, but is hogwash. They are reporting personally losses of 30 to 40% of their bees every year. And some of that is weakening them so that other pests like varroa mites can have a much more devastating impact.
Okay, you have 6 minutes.
That's great, and I'm going to talk about the same subject.
Don't
Great.
forget that you both have a concluding remark, so you'll have an opportunity. You have such a long time. I'm going to go grab the basket and start.
Yeah, you got plenty of time, John.
All right.
Okay, so this is my take on this, and what Robin's talking about is House Bill 706, which became Act 182. Up until last year, usage was allowed in all 50 states. New York has adopted, as Robin said, and Vermont is to follow. Dairy farmers are going to suffer from this, and I think it's directed towards them. The orchards get an exemption. They don't get a full exemption. They can't spray this during the bloom, but they can spray it the rest of the time. I don't see too many beehives in cornfields, but I do see a lot of them around orchards. I mean, that's bees are used for pollination for that. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned with that. Robin has an exemption for farmers. It's onerous, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on them. It requires additional time to achieve compliance. It requires that the person seeking the exemption complete a pest risk assessment at their cost and submit it to the Secretary of Natural Resources. It also requires them to complete an integrated pest management training. They're required to maintain records of the pest risk assessment and identify where these seeds are planted. And after they do this all, the Secretary of Natural Resources can still place restrictions on them. The Secretary of Agriculture can rescind them. While the bill states the Secretary of Agriculture shall work with seed companies to ensure access, the farmer will ultimately be on his own to find the source of seed, in hopes that it's obtainable. There are no cost estimates given to the farmer. They will have to figure out that for themselves. And when all this is figured out and the seed is planted, even if obtained at the same cost, the yield for their crop will likely be less. And it will have to be subtracted from the profit margin, which hardly exists now. These hard-working folks have been an essential part of our landscape for decades. They are part of our state's identity and way of life, who have done this not for profit or very little profit. They have done this for the love and connection that they have to the land. They preserve our landscapes, they add value to our lives. One only has to drive through the Meadowee Valley to appreciate this. We should do all we can to help these folks and not make it more difficult. At one time, Vermont had 4,000 farms. We have a little over 400 now. I'm a beekeeper. I have been for 20 years. I'm concerned about this. And neonics do have an effect on them. There's no question about that. And sometimes you have to choose. You have hard decisions to make. You have to choose between the farmers and the bees. If you, as a beekeeper, I can tell you varroa mites are the biggest threat to bees, period. If you go on a bee forum, any place, talk to a beekeeper, they'll tell you varroa mites. If you could solve that problem, we'd be golden. The problem that I had with this bill also is the way it was approached. Robin only contacted 2 of these folks. There's about 7 farmers that are affected by this. Robin reached out to 2 of them. How do I know that? Because that's what he told me. At a meeting at the Pawlet Library with 5 or 6 of his constituents, and some of those people are sitting here. They weren't talked to, these other 5. It was never discussed. They never had the opportunity. The 2 that he talked to, one his comment was, well, you know how he is, and the other was, they're on board. They're not on board. I have talked to them all. None of them are on board. They are adamantly opposed to this, and this will harm them. And the statement that he made that we're on board was just not truthful. It was not truthful. And that concerns me, because I think his interests were put in front of his constituents. And that concerns me. I mean, that's what it's all about. You know, not what I want to accomplish, but what I can accomplish for the people that put me there. And there's a difference. And that's what I want to do. I don't have the knowledge of all these bills Robin has. I haven't been there for 10 years. But I can look at things fair and objectively and compromise for both sides. I've made it a point to go to folks' houses when I knock on doors that have Robin signs. I'm not trying to change their political views. What I'm trying to do is tell them, listen, if I'm going to go up there, I need to represent you too. And if I don't understand what your concerns are, I can't do that. And that's not right to you. And in this case, that didn't happen to our farmers. And it's unfortunate, but it's the truth. So it's a little bit about the bill, and it's a little bit about how the bill was handled. I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go on to the portion where I'm going to read your questions. I'm probably not going to read them verbatim, but I'm going to take the high point of your questions and ask it, and I'll give each of you 2 to 3 minutes to respond to each question. I'm going to touch on a bunch of different topics. I'll start with you, Robin, because we started with Chris on the other ones. But the question is, what is the future of using wood for heating and the climate bill and legislation under consideration?
I'm going to take a quick 30 seconds of this time to say that there are several statements in Chris's follow-up there that are flat out inaccurate. I spoke personally with 3 farmers, left voice messages for at least 2 more, did not speak with them. 2 of the 3 that I spoke to said, when we talked about it, yes, they agreed, they were on board. Things may have changed since then. I know people were not happy with me personally, but with the goals of the program. They were, I believe, at least one of them said, yes, I'm on board. What he actually said was, yes, I'm on board if this is not a giveaway to the organic dairy farmers. Okay, so switching back to the wood industry.
Use of wood, what is the future of using wood for heating in the climate bill and legislation under consideration?
Most of the climate bills include clean heat technology as an environmental heating source. That's wood pellets, and that's primarily wood pellets, or catalytic converters on wood stoves, things to make wood burn more efficiently. It is a renewable resource, obviously, and is considered an important part of the energy future of Vermont.
Chris, future, do you have any feelings on wood and how it's handled in the climate bill?
It's a big source of heat in Vermont. I mean, we can't take this away from people. You know, the resource, we have it, it's unlimited. Let's use it. I mean, we can't make, you know, I think we want to work towards a cleaner environment. I think we want to do these things. You know, I've had solar panels for 25 years. You know, I have heat pumps. You know, I believe in what it's trying to accomplish. What I don't believe in is the way they're trying to go about accomplishing it and the harm that it is going to do to people. It is going to harm these people. It's going to harm them. So I think let's just make, yeah, I think let's, you know, I think goals are admirable. I think they're admirable. I think that's what all Vermonters try to do. We try to do our best. And I don't think that we should be forced to penalize if we don't achieve that. And that's what that bill does. You know, and there's just got to be give and take, and there's none. There's just none. I feel there's none. Maybe other folks feel differently, but you know, I think we can work together to accomplish what he's trying to do. But again, remember, at the end of the day, for this initiative that we're talking about, according to Energy Action Network's own report, and these are people, Robin will tell you, they are 100% behind this program. Their own report, and they're issuing one, I think at 4 o'clock today they issued their next one. This was their 2023 report. They show a trend. Vermont is going down, and Vermont's got a lot of work to do. Per capita, we are not the best. We're one of the you know, least best in New England. There's work we can do. We can improve on this, but on the global thing, which is what we're trying to really accomplish. That's what this whole thing is about. Reducing global. We're all working together to reduce this. It makes no difference. It doesn't change the flooding. It doesn't change whether we hit it or not. It doesn't change. Does that mean we throw it out and don't do it? No, I think we work towards it. But the price that we're asking people to pay, we just can't do it. We just can't do it. So.
Thank you. I have a suspicion I know what the answer is going to be. But the question, Chris, is what do you feel is the greatest threat to the Vermont economy? And name one way you feel this threat should be addressed. And then I'll give you 2 minutes to respond as well, Robin.
Yeah, I think it's spending. I think we got up, you know, we're a small state. We have 640,000 people, 230,000 households. We're a small state. We have a small tax base. We got to live within our means. And, you know, it's great to do all this stuff. And it's not that I'm against it, but, you know, some of the people that we're trying to help with the expense that it's causing other people, we're pushing them into that group. And I just don't think that's what we should be doing. I just don't think we should be doing that. I think we, you know, I think we have to make some hard decisions. I mean, we have stuff down the road in this, you know, the incoming legislature You know, there's stuff we haven't even dealt with yet. We have $6 billion of deferred maintenance on schools. $6 billion. 250 million need, you know, the appropriations immediately. We have 37 dams that are critical in this state. We have 75 deficient bridges. I mean, we have a lot of stuff on us that we haven't even talked about yet, and where are we going to get the money to do it? And I think we just need to sit down and what are these priorities? What are the things that benefit all Vermonters? And focus on them and work on them together and try to solve them and move on. But I think it's hard to do that. In this last biennium, there was 1,200 bills introduced. 1,200. How does anybody give the time that's necessary, spend the time that's necessary, and be productive on moving us forward? 1,200. There was one House member that introduced 100 himself. What are we doing? What are we doing? You know, I told my friend Terry Williams, the senator from Rutland, you know, he had, a year ago, he asked me, yeah, you ought to run, you ought to run. I said, Terry, I said, you know what you guys ought to do? The Senate ought to pick 5 issues that are most important to Vermont, and the House ought to pick them, and you ought to fix them. That's what you ought to do. We ought to fix them and work on them instead of getting all going every which way. I think it's important. And I think we have to work together, and I don't think that's happening. And it's not helping any of us. It's dividing us. That's what it's doing.
Robin, the question is, what do you feel is the greatest threat to the Vermont economy, and name one way you feel that it should be addressed?
I think the greatest threat to the Vermont economy is basically our demographics. That we are an aging state, we're losing workforce, we're losing children. We need to attract more people here. We're not going to have the children ourselves. We need to attract people who will have children and create a future here. That requires addressing these multitudes of factors like housing, like jobs, like childcare, like health care. Housing being, I think, probably the biggest and most obvious one there. However, we don't always get to choose our priorities. Mother Nature chose flooding and housing for us last year as the priority. Regardless of what we wanted to address, that was front and center. Also, the thing, affordability is absolutely key. Another reason we need to bring in more people to expand the tax base to reduce the burden on each of us individually. You cannot cut your way to prosperity. It goes back to the planning, the vision, and the smart investments. And that's what we need to focus on.
Okay. Jed, in order to get through all these questions, I'm going to say 2 to 3 minutes rather than 3 to 4 minutes.
We'll be at 30 seconds by the end, right?
Yeah, well, it might be. I've got a doozy for the end, so it's a good one. To Robin, to make our communities safer, what would you do to make our communities safer than they are right now? A couple of minutes.
First of all, I have the greatest respect for law enforcement. I think every time that I read about the the Vermont state troopers, who I know are down 50, 60 positions, something like that. I mean, it's pretty extreme. And then you read about them dismissing somebody. Usually it's for things like stealing from the evidence locker. And I fully support the state police in upholding those high standards that we deserve. What they need, I don't know. That's where I'll ask the experts. Ask state police, ask law enforcement. What do you need? What can we do? That's what Project Vision was born out of. It was the police saying, we can't arrest our way out of a drug epidemic. We, as a state, local leaders said, what can we do? And Project Vision was born to bring together law enforcement, psychological counseling, employers, jobs, housing. It's that kind of asking, working together, and creatively solving problems that can help not just law enforcement, but so many situations.
Question was to Chris, how would you make our communities safer than they are right now?
Yeah. I think part of that solution is holding people accountable for their actions. I'm not sure that we do the best job of that. You know, and I think there's other problems that contribute to it. You know, a lot of these folks turn to this because they've lost hope. They can't afford things, and so they choose to make gain in different ways. We have mental health issues. I think we need to address these. I think it's a cause of a lot of things. And while I was out visiting folks, I visited this lady in Middletown Springs who is involved with this. As a matter of fact, Terry Williams, the senator, submitted a Senate bill, S-284, on this. This lady has worked hard. She's networked with teachers and parents and people, and her concern is the impact that cell phones and some of this digital stuff has had on kids. And she gave me this book. She said, "Have you ever read this book?" I said, "I haven't." And it's called The Anxious Generation. And I would encourage anybody and everybody to read this book. And it talks about the damage that has been done to our young folks, you know, and it directly links them to cell phones and social media and some of this other stuff. It's caused depression, suicide, it's just multiple. And this has been going on for years. And these people become adults, and they keep these traits with them. You know, the bill that Terry has put forth, I would support and vote for in a minute. I think Robin's been asked to do a companion bill on it. I don't know if he's done that or not, but I'm sure that Robin is on board with this. I'm sure he's on board with this. But this is something that we can do, and it doesn't cost us a lot of money. That's the other thing. There's not a lot of costs involved with this. You know, we make a thing for the kids at the schools to put cell phones in, and maybe it can be made at the shop class at the high school. I mean, it's an easy thing to do, and it's a start. You know, we talk about it, but let's start trying to do something about it. We don't have to study it for years. It's an easy thing to do. Let's just try it. You know, and you're starting to see schools around, you know, around the state doing it. You know, I've watched 2 or 3 schools now. You know, it's catching on because people have figured it out. It distracts teachers. It's just a great distraction, and it affects a lot of people. It's an easy thing to do. Let's just move forward with it and do it.
Thank you, Chris. I'll give you 30 seconds because there was a question asked.
Yes, thank you. Senator Williams introduced the bill in the Senate. I introduced the bill in the House last year. Terry's bill made it pretty far in the Senate, but not across the finish line. He will be introducing a revised bill this year in the Senate. I will be introducing a revised bill this year in the House for many of the reasons that Chris just discussed. One of the most shocking things to me is that if you look at the graph of teen depression, self-harm, suicidal impulse, it perfectly mirrors the graph of cell phone adaptation among teen users.
Thank you.
Get the book and read it. It's pretty powerful.
I'm going to read these questions in tandem, and I'm going to go first to you, Chris, because they're almost the same thing. Everyone is focused on the cost of government in Vermont. Taxes pay for it all, from schools to roads and helping people in need. If you are elected to represent this district, what would you support cutting to meet your goals on taxation? Would it be school budgets, government agencies such as DCF, transportation, corrections, etc.? Please don't say eliminate waste from the system. While everyone likes the thought of lower taxes, what services for Vermonters are you willing to sacrifice or cut? The government always has to fulfill certain costs. How would lower taxes not be met by higher fees or something else elsewhere?
Well, the first thing I think I would look at, and again, you know, not being there and knowing all these issues and being able to study them is a little different. Robin obviously has an advantage there. But there was a report that was just released. It's 133 pages long. I haven't read it yet, but I've read the executive summary, and it's regarding our school spending. And it was just released by the fiscal office. And what they say is that we spend almost $500 million more than we have to, and about $4,000 more a student than we have to, and we can change this and have better outcomes. Now, how we do this, I don't know. I've not read the report, but that's coming right from the fiscal office. It's a 133-page report, and that's what's summed up in the summary. We're at around $16,000 or $17,000 a student. The report says we should be at $12,000. You know, is it a cut? I don't know. I don't know if it's a cut, but it's a savings, and we ought to look at it. I mean, they're telling us that we don't have to spend this much. So where is it that we're losing close to $500 million? It's worth investigating. If there was a way to navigate through that, that's a pretty big chunk. You know, it's a pretty big chunk out of things. So, you know, for me, I think you just have to look at everything, and you have to look at, you know, what the cost and the benefit is, and is there room to do? I mean, how is this stuff approached when we vote for it? You know, is last year's budget, did we just work because it was X amount of dollars? Next year we'll just add a few more for CPI and whatever, or do we actually, you know, do we focus and look at those things and have a budget like we have to have a budget?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Please.
Everyone is focused on the cost of government in Vermont. Taxes pay for it all, from schools to roads, helping people in need. If you were elected to represent this district, what would you support cutting to meet your goals on taxation? Would it be school budgets, government agencies such as DCF, transportation, corrections, etc.? Please don't use eliminate waste from the system in your answer. And the government has to fulfill certain costs. How would you lower taxes so that they would not be met by higher fees elsewhere?
I think the report that Chris was just discussing on finding efficiencies in the education budget is a universal goal. The legislature this year created a commission on the future of higher education specifically to look for those efficiencies in governance, in instructions, in consolidation of supervisory unions, of districts, potentially of schools. Let's look at options. It's all on the table. So yes, that is an area definitely where I would be looking. However, Vermont has traditionally placed in the top 4 or 5 in the country in quality of education. I do not want to lose that. That is valuable. That is our future. And I don't want to make cuts where we look at what we're left with and say, oh my God, what have we done? Another area that I introduced a bill to revise the governance of the Vermont State University system. Senator Collmore was on board with most of my bill, but not all of it. And one of the things that I did in there was the pretty bold step of eliminating the office of the chancellor. We have 8,000 students in the higher ed system in Vermont. We have 4 campuses in the state university system, plus the community college network. That's not counting UVM. Each campus has a president. There's a chancellor. There's a president of the community college network. There is a lot of overhead, a lot of bureaucracy for 8,000 students. 8,000 students is a small university. And that's one place I would be looking for efficiencies.
Thank you. I'm going to read another two questions kind of in tandem. I'm concerned about the future of agriculture in our valley. My question has two parts. What, in the specific capacity of the office you are seeking, will be your priorities for the future of agriculture in our community? Considering the specific opportunities and constraints of the office, what specific actions will you take? And another person had a question about how to protect Vermont's essential immigration agricultural workers. So, question about agriculture in the valley and what things you would do to promote the future of agriculture in our community, and are there any particular actions that you would take, and your thoughts on immigrant agricultural workers that are essential to many of our agricultural businesses. I can't remember who, I think I started with Chris first last time, so it's Robin, it's your turn.
The future of agriculture in Vermont is a tough one. It has always evolved. It's always followed boom-bust cycles with sheep, potatoes, dairy, impacted more by national trends or regulations than by what Vermont is doing. Dairy is a commodity. Dairy farmers in Vermont are competing with 30,000 cow operations in Wisconsin and California. They cannot produce milk cheaply enough to compete with those operations. What we can do to support them is support specialty products, support on-farm activities. And I've actually been very involved in a lot of those things, like changing the rules, making it easier for farmers to slaughter, process, and sell meat and poultry on farm, to sell raw milk on farm, to offer agritourism, to offer glamping, to put more money into the pockets of farmers. But if you are competing in a, I went to the Agency of Agriculture and I said, you're the Agency of Agriculture and Markets. How about marketing Vermont milk? Vermont milk in glass bottles, premium milk, sold in Boston and New York and Rockland, Maine. And they said, we're not going to get involved in that. And it's like, that is what we can do. Vermont is a brand that we can market, that we can use to help farmers stay in business, which in turn creates the Vermont that we are marketing. So I think supporting Vermont farms is critical, but in that there has to be adaptation and change. And I don't know what that is. I'm not driving it. I'm just trying to respond to it.
Chris?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think we have. I think they have to be preserved. I think we have to do everything that we possibly can to protect these folks. I just think I can't imagine a Vermont without them. You know, I can't imagine driving down the side of the road and seeing open fields and cows and people haying. I mean, it's just, I just can't imagine. So, you know, I would be willing to make any reasonable investment that protects these folks. You know, they're salt of the earth, and what they do, they don't get paid much for. Most of them go backwards. You know, my brother-in-law just sold his herd about 2 months ago. Not easy. He was probably the last farm in Castleton. Did it with his father his whole life. Just couldn't make it. We got to do something about it before they're all gone. So.
I'm going to move on to housing. Chris, what are some practical steps you can take as a legislature to make housing more affordable in Vermont?
That's $1 million question.
It is.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I think there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of places that can be rehabbed. You know, the price of everything has gone up. And I really don't know how you combat that. You know, the values, I think the values in real estate that have happened in this state don't help matters a lot. You know, it makes it, if you're working or living in this economy at these economy wages, and that's your sole source of income, it's tough. I don't know. I don't have the answer. You know, I don't know how kids that, you know, that grow up here are going to be able to afford to stay here. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know how you control that. You know, I wish I had the answer for you. I don't. I don't know what it is. You know, I recognize it's a problem. I think we all recognize it's a problem. You know, solutions aren't always easy. And, you know, there's things that we can do, I think, with existing properties we have. But, you know, a lot of people that I've talked to, you know, I talked to 3 people in Wells in one day that are leaving. They're leaving Vermont. They've been here their whole life. They can't afford it anymore. And their real estate they're paying taxes on real estate 3 times what they would have ever been able to afford to purchase it for. And the value of it, they're cashing out. And, you know, one of the folks is going to Nebraska. One's going to the Carolinas. I don't know, they might have changed their mind on that. But, and the other was going to Tennessee. And it was because, you know, they really didn't have a choice. You know, they were retired. They had a small nest egg that they thought would work for them, and it's not. And it's a shame. And it's happened to a lot of people in this state. You know, and that's what my concern is. You know, again, I hate to sound like a broken record on this spending, but we you know, we have challenges, huge challenges, inflation, you know, things that neither Rob and I can control. But as a legislator, we can be sensitive and we can understand how those affect people and use our judgment when we spend the money. And I think that's what, you know, I think that's important to focus on. I just, you know.
Robin, what are the practical steps you as a legislature can affect to make housing more affordable?
This is, as Chris said, a challenging, very challenging issue. Much of this crisis was again exposed when COVID hit, and people in other parts of the country earning far more than they would earn in Vermont decided Vermont was a safe place to move to and were willing to pay. And property prices went through the roof and have not come back down. We can't affect that. What we have done are some small steps like, and I'm just going to say, as a realtor, I sit on the Vermont Association Board of Realtors Government Affairs Committee. I have kind of an inside track there. Because I support bills and issues that help Vermonters, not the real estate industry, I was not endorsed by the Vermont Association of Realtors. One of those bills was to increase the property transfer tax on second homes. If you're buying a second home, you can pay a higher rate of tax. I heard of a gentleman in one of the towns in this district who was very upset because he was paying $28,000 in taxes on his second home, on the property transfer tax. And I said, wait a minute, that's like a $2 million second home bought with cash. I'm not really worried about his $28,000. That's not who I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the people that are leaving the state because they can't afford to stay here, because property has increased too much in value. And we rely too much on property taxes to pay our bills. So again, going back to income tax rather than property tax as a fairer measure of what people can pay. I think both the administration and the legislature agree on many of the programs. We work closely on many of those. The VHIP program to rehabilitate existing units, creating more structures. The goal is actually the big farmhouses that you see that have one person living in them, or maybe two. If you can create another apartment in there, bring in someone who may be a caregiver or maybe is just paying rent so that the person can afford to stay on the family farm. That's a win-win. That's a program very popular. Governor loves it, legislature loves it. It's a matter of finding the money for it. There are programs like that that we can and are supporting. So there are things we can do. There are small things, but they are steps. How am I on time? Am I done?
Over by 8 seconds.
Okay.
So it is 8:30. That was the planned on breaking time. Gentlemen, I have a few more questions here. Do you want to keep?
I'm fine if you're all willing to stay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they can leave. You two. You two are the ones that we're all here to listen to. So I'm going to you, Robin. I'd like to know what you plan to do about rising costs of education. Consolidations were supposed to save money, but costs seem to keep increasing. WCAX recently had a report about the higher price of education does not correlate with better education. I'm taking that as what they're saying to be true. I don't know that. At a recent school board meeting, I was appalled to hear that the goal is to have 40% of elementary students at or above grade average. So, any plans or thoughts about rising costs of education?
Well, we've touched on that several times. One thing I'd like to come back to is that costs of education are not measured the same in every state. Again, the cost of the support systems that we provide to students are not considered education costs by other states, so we're not comparing apples to apples when we talk about the cost of educating a student. I think that we can definitely find efficiencies in governance. One of the peculiarities of Vermont and one of the flaws of Vermont is that we all want to do it here. We want to do it locally. And so we have, 52 supervisory unions? We have 28 electric utilities. We have, I think, 17 solid waste districts. This is in a state of 630,000 people. It's crazy. We need to look at the efficiencies of consolidation, at least of governance. And I think that's where we find those savings, but again, not at the expense of student instruction and quality of education.
Chris?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on out-of-control rising costs of education? Consolidations were supposed to save money, but costs seem to keep increasing.
Yeah, I think we have to look at the administrative burdens we have. I mean, City of Boston has about the same population as the state of Vermont. They have one district, one school district. How many do we have?
Oh.
Yeah.
More than I have fingers and toes.
We got to look at that, and I think, some of these. It's a tough issue, the school closures. There was towns, where these elementary schools are the core of the town. They're the core of the town, some of these folks made the hard decisions to give them up to save money, and they didn't. I think I think the administrative costs have to be looked at hard. I just think that, you know, it doesn't have to be so deep. And I think there's a lot of savings in consolidation. And again, I'm interested in this report, you know, the physical report. I mean, we're $450 million in savings. Where are they getting this from? How are they arriving at it? You know, maybe it's contained in there, maybe it's not, but...
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to read these two questions kind of in tandem. In light of the flooding of Irene, July of 2023 and July of 2024, and the cost to taxpayers as a result of those events, how do you think Vermont can best respond to the ongoing impact of global warming? Start with you, Chris.
Yeah, I think we got to focus on Vermont, you know, and I think, and prioritize it. You know, and that's one of my deals with this, the money that's being spent on, you know, the Affordable Heat Act, the Renewable Energy Standard. It's a lot of money. And would it be better spent on resiliency efforts in the state? I think it would be. You know, and some of these things aren't going to change, you know, where they're located. I mean, you know, in Barrie and some of these places, I mean, you know, I don't know how you're going to change those things. You know, the towns are going to have to change. You know, where these places are built, all this stuff has to be a consideration. You know, wanting it to go away and knowing that it's not, you know, is I think you know, I think we have to think differently about this, because you know, whether you know, we change global warming or not, I mean, this is going to it's going to be a while before we get to that point. And you know, and if we think it's going to fix it, I don't know. I don't want to wait 10, 15 years. I mean, there's stuff that we can do here now, resiliency efforts, and I think, but again, it's a priority of spending, you know. And I think I think we just have to prioritize things. And I think that's, you know, up towards the top of the list. You know, we've seen the effects, the devastating effects it's had here. Way more devastating in a lot of other places. And it's going to continue, I think. I mean, nobody's going to make a magic wand and make this stuff go away. I think we should just plan that, you know, we should expect this stuff. So knowing that, how do we deal with it? You know, how do we adapt to it the best we can?
Thank you. In light of the recent severe weather events, how do you think Vermont can best respond to the ongoing impact of global warming?
Focusing on resilience is absolutely key, but it's a lot more than just resilience. With extreme weather events increasing, we need to rethink how and where we build. We need to rethink, what will our economy support? Dairy farms, will it support a ski industry? Will we have maple syrup? Will we have fall foliage? What will we do without these things? This is a lot more than just dealing with flooding. Flooding is a key piece of it, but it's part of a much larger puzzle. And where Vermont can have an impact far beyond our borders and our state is in things like 20 years ago, we created Efficiency Vermont here in Vermont. That's an insane idea, to have an electric utility who deals in not using electricity. They make money in not using the product that they nominally sell. They sell efficiency. That model has been exported around the country and around the world. And in their mandate is that they need to return more benefit than the funding they receive from Vermont, from the state and Vermonters. There's a piece on your bill to fund their work. That idea has had impact far beyond our state, far beyond what we can do here ourselves. So we have a role that we can play, to be an example, to inspire, to try things because we're small and we can try them on a smaller scale. And that is a critical role that Vermont can and should continue to play.
Thank you. We're getting into the harder and harder questions.
These have been easy?
Well, we're going first to you, Chris. Excuse me, Robin. In light of the recent overturn of Roe v. Wade, how do you feel the state legislature should handle laws regarding abortion in Vermont? It's been said that it should be a states' rights issue.
It is currently a states' rights issue, and the state has acted decisively, putting reproductive choice freedom into the state constitution. So that is how Vermont has chosen to act, and I supported that strongly. That is not completing the picture, because there will still be issues, questions about people from other states coming here, questions about mailing prescription abortion medicines here, about people who aid people coming from other states. There will be other questions addressed by the legislature. I will continue to support, number one, personal decision, freedom of choice. I do not have the right to tell a woman that she must bear a child any more than I have the right to tell her that she cannot bear a child. I feel very strongly about that. However, I would like to see it be a federal law so that we don't have a patchwork, so we don't have states competing against each other, so we don't have people punished or criminal charges filed against them for traveling to another state to seek medical care. I would like to see a federal law enshrining the protections of Roe v. Wade, the protections that we have introduced and codified here in Vermont.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, for me, it's a settled issue in Vermont. It's a settled issue. It's law, and it's embedded in our Constitution. I don't know, it's not, I know people feel strongly on it on both sides, but, it's been decided.
Would you, again, I'm taking moderator's prerogative and kind of modifying some of these questions. Income sensitivity and property taxes. So when we're talking about property tax percentage increases, are they really accurate when you take income sensitivity into the picture? And should there be any changes to that income sensitivity program?
Yeah, Robin will have to take this one. I'm aware of the program. I don't know how it's structured. I know what its intent is. And I think it's helpful to a great many Vermonters. I think a lot of Vermonters depend on it. My mom and dad depended on it. It's a safety net for a lot of these people, and I think it's got to be in place. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Robin?
The income sensitivity adjustment to property taxes do make it so that tax rates are malleable. I think that is the problem with the tax system that we have, that there is very little connection between the school budget that you vote on and the property taxes you pay. It runs through too many filters, too many layers. Your town CLA, Tinmouth, for example, their tax rate for homestead property, tax rate decreased 26%, and tax bills went up because their assessments went up. That makes sense in a mathematical world, but not in a human world. And it's been really painful for the community of Tinmouth. I think if the income sensitivity makes it a property tax system buffered by income. If we just made it an income-based system, we would lose that complexity, that confusion and shading. So that's yet another reason why it should be, our education should be funded through income taxes rather than property taxes. In the meantime, I think the income sensitivity is a really critical piece that protects a lot of Vermonters. 2/3 of Vermonters benefit from that.
Robin, again, kind of playing off of that theme, do you support reforming the non-homestead tax rate to allow for targeted tax rate increases to short-term rentals and vacation homes without impacting businesses and long-term rentals?
Short answer is yes. I think the non-homestead rate needs to be overhauled dramatically because it's insane to tax open parcels of land at the same rate as a business or a rental, an apartment unit. So there need to be different categories of non-homestead property taxes, and those can be adjusted for different categories.
Chris?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and one of the reasons why is my sister and brother and I have a camp on Lake St. Catherine that our folks left us. It's been in the family 100 years. We'd like to hang on to it, but we pay a different rate on it, and we've lived here all our life. And I think this happens to a lot of people. Deer camps, stuff like that. You know, I think that's got to be considered. You know, it's not an easy thing. I had a friend that, you know, he lives in Timoth. Been friends ever since we've been like this. And his wife always wanted some lake property. So about 8 years ago, they bought a piece of property in Shoreham, right across from the paper plant. But it was a place, they built a little cabin. They could go there for the weekend and relax and enjoy themselves and hang out. And she's always wanted to do it. Shoreham reassessed this year, and the piece of property they bought for $80,000 is now assessed at $360,000, and they're going to have to sell it. And you know, he's an optimistic guy. He says, yeah, you know, he says it's, you know, we're going to make out a lot better than what we had into it. He says, well, yeah, we'll just cash out. We don't want to do that, but we have to. And he drove and left to go to work, and I got thinking. I said, well, it's nice that you have that option, but what if you were dealing with this and it was your primary home? And people are. A lot of people are. So.
Thank you. I'm going to do maybe 2 more questions, and then we'll call it a night. Oh,
That's my bedtime.
I'm going to do one more question, because I forgot we need to wrap up
Closing,
with your
yeah.
closing statement.
Yeah.
So my last question is, we're going to you first, Chris.
Okay.
If you were elected, what would you be most looking forward to in the legislative session? I'm sure it's the cafeteria food.
Well, I was going to ask Robin about that, because if I end up there, I would, you know, he can tell me about the food up there, and if I ended up there, I wouldn't want to get sick the first day on the job and disappoint people. I don't know. It's exciting for me to interact with people, I guess, and be part of that process and to understand it better. You know, I just think it would be a great experience for me. But you know, the reason I'm going there is the concerns that I've kind of given you tonight. You know, I just want to make things better for people. That's what I want to do, and I think that you know, I think this spending is a key part of that. I just believe that, and so you know, that's what I would focus on. But it would be a great experience. You know, I have the Rutland County Senators and Patty McCoy have been very supportive to me. A lot of people in the community have been supportive to me. And, you know, there's a lot of people that have spent a lot of their personal time on my behalf, and I'm appreciative of that. And I just want to help people. That's why I want to go, you know. And win or lose, you know, I'm okay with either. But this is way out of my comfort zone. Knocking on doors, you know. Robin and I have had a very good relationship through this campaign, and I think that's important. You know, way back when I got into this in April, he sent me an email. So I see you threw your hat in the ring. He says, I hope we can run a respectful campaign. And we have, I think. We've respected we've respected each other. You know, I have visited folks that support him and will support him, that he's visited, and they've told me, and when they asked me about him, he said he's a nice guy, and he's a nice guy too. We just think, you know, we just have different visions. That's what we have. We just have different concerns, and you know, all we're both trying to do is go out and give people information, give them our side, and give them the opportunity to make an informed decision. I'm very appreciative that this campaign has been that way. There's no reason for them not to be this way. There's too much anger in this world, so. Yeah.
What are you looking most for in the legislative session, if elected?
Well, Chris, I'll give you a sneak preview. It's not the food. Nor is it the opportunity to buy swag. Because you're not given anything. I'm going to use the old tagline of the U.S. Army and say it's the toughest job you'll ever love. You know, it's overwhelming, it's unrelenting, it's questions far beyond the capability of any person to solve, but you get to try, and you get to forge unexpected alliances. And I would say Senator Williams and I, on this meeting of mine on cell phones and social media, it's been really rewarding to bridge that chasm, to find, to have the opportunity to learn, to dig into subjects, to look for creative solutions that aren't necessarily money. You know, the expansion of broadband has the added benefit of decreasing pollution because it reduces commuting and travel time. You can study from home, you can work from home, you can shop from home. You know, there are multiple approaches to problem solving, and it's finding those synergies that is so rewarding and making it work for Vermonters. That's what is exciting to me. That's why I want to go back.
Thank you. So I'm going to give each candidate 4 to 5 minutes to wrap up with a concluding statement. And I'm going to start with you, Robin, and then we'll go to Chris, because we started with Chris with introductions.
So I want to thank you all for coming here tonight. Thank you for participating. Thank you for caring, for putting your energy, your time, your devotion into making Vermont work, for, you know, this democracy at the local level. That's what makes this rewarding. I also want to thank, of course, the fire department for hosting us here. Not just the fire department, but I want to thank all the many volunteers that make a community work. The school boards, who are unsung heroes in my book. All the municipal officials, the town clerk, the select boards, the planning commissions, the zoning commissions, all of these people who work boring, difficult, challenging work to make our communities function and make Vermont the rich life, community life that it is. And this is part of it, so thank you for being here. Thank you for creating this. Tonight we have touched on a few of the many topics that come up in the legislature. I think Chris touched on a few fewer than I did. But, you know, the legislature passed 185 bills. That's a really broad array. We have no idea what those bills will be in the coming 2 years. We had no idea the flooding was coming. So you need to know as much about us as you can on a wide array of topics so that you can form your opinion of, well, who do I most trust in this situation? And I think we're both trustworthy people. But whose decisions do I align with the most? And I think it's really important to learn about a wide variety of of issues. I know Chris is really focused on affordability. That is major. It's key. But there are a lot of other issues, social issues, that make up our work there. And I think that while the topics vary that we may address, my approach doesn't. My approach is I listen, I learn, I ask questions, and I vote with what I think is the best vote for Vermonters. I mentioned earlier that I was not endorsed by the Vermont Association of Realtors. Sorry. Because my votes have been for what I think is best for Vermont and Vermonters, not for a particular industry. I'm going to mention a few conversations that I've had with people outside of Montpelier. One was a vice president of Green Mountain Power who was retiring. He used to spend a lot of time in the Capitol building, and as he was on his way out the door, we had lunch together, and he said, you know, I always like talking with you. Half the time you really infuriate me, but I know that you will always listen. Another, I was talking with a young woman at an event and introduced myself, and she said, oh, you're Robin, you ask really good questions. She said, I know, I'm an attorney for the Natural Resources Department, and I have to answer them for the next day. A conservative TV host in Montpelier, with whom I actually share very little in common, probably, said, I always like talking to you because you can explain a progressive position so I understand it. And I think those are the values that I bring, that I can talk to people, I listen to people, I learn, can synthesize. And if that is my legacy in Montpelier, I embrace it with both arms. I'm really proud to be that person. So thank you, and I hope to continue to carry out that work for you.
Yeah, so thank you for coming. Thanks for the value of your time, and thanks for being engaged. I think it's important. I think a lot more of us have to be engaged. You know, one of the things I've been telling people is, you know, you got to get involved in the process, because those people that are the ones that bring these bills forward, and the people that aren't are the ones that let them become law. And you know, I can't offer you the experience that Robin has. I suppose when you first gave him that opportunity, he didn't have that experience either. You know, my service in government is limited, you know. It was mostly done when my wife and I bought our first house in Rupert. I had an old, there was a neighbor down the road, George Gordy, had a small farm, and he had just finished off and retired, and his sons didn't want to take it over, so he closed the farm off. And he used to walk by my house frequently. And if I was outside, he'd come over and we'd chew the fat and talk about stuff. And one day he said, you know, he says, you ought to get involved in the town stuff. And I said, well, what do you have in mind, George? He said, well, you know, there's an open on the planning commission. I'm on the select board. You know, if you're interested, why don't you come down and, you know, check in on it. So I did. And I got on the planning commission, and I served with Jed the whole time I was in Rupert. A year later, through one of our talks, George comes up and says, you know, you ought to think about getting on the select board. You ought to think about running for it. So I said, okay, George, I'll try it. So I served 3 or 4 terms for that. I was appointed to the Bennington Regional County Planning Commission and served there for a while. And that was the extent of my politics. You know, in my work, you know, in the work that I did as a service manager, you know, I was responsible for a lot of folks. You know, I had probably 25 or 30 people that I was responsible for. And I was responsible for their financial well-being, and I was responsible for the dealership's financial well-being. And I always balanced those because I thought it was important. And you know, a lot of the decisions that I made, you know, during that time involved my employees because it affected them. And you know, I learned that it always was a better way to go. It was always a better thing to do. It got them involved, it got them excited, and it got them motivated to reach a goal. And that's the way I do things. I guess that's the way I would try to do things in Montpelier. You know, it's all new to me. Quite honest with you, it's all new to me. But I'm a good listener, I'm fair-minded, and you know, and I try to look at both sides and reach consensus and meet halfway if we can. You know, if I feel that, you know, it's going to affect the people that I'm concerned about on an affordability issue, I'm probably not going to vote for it. That's the way I'm going to be on that issue. You know, I'm concerned about the unity, and I'm concerned about the imbalance. And I think, again, you know, I think it needs to be more balanced. I just think there needs to be more balance and more, you know, more reaching across the aisle to each other. And that's just not happening, I don't believe. So, you know, I'm asking for the opportunity to do that. And you know, and I'll do the best I can for you on, you know, in that manner. So I appreciate you all coming tonight. And, you know, again, as I said earlier, I appreciate the campaign that we ran. It was, you know, we'd stop, we sat at Max a couple times trying to work this whole thing out, and, you know, that's the way it should be. Just, you know, we're all trying to do the right thing for our for the people that we care about. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I feel as a district we're very lucky. We have 2 candidates who are willing to stand in front of the public, answer questions, explain their positions, so we're very fortunate. We have a tough choice to make. Thank you, and don't forget to vote.